and welcome to January's webinar, Why Systems Struggle and How They Can Change. I am Monica Lewis, and I am here with the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership, and so excited to have you guys all join us. I have two amazing panelists that are joining me, and I'm going to allow for them to do their own bios and introduce themselves to you guys while we go through just some questions as a panel just to discuss a few things throughout the entire presentation. You are welcome to send questions through the chat or through the Q&A button. There will be time at the end for question and answer as well, but also throughout the panel, if you have questions, feel free to send it over or just come off the mute if you are able to, and we will happily answer your questions. So first up, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Monica Lewis. I am new here at the National Center, Power Through ECIC. I have been a parent leader since 2015. Came over into the systems back in 2021. I worked in home visiting for a very long time, probably about 8 years. And then I've been doing parent engagement and consulting for the last 6 years. So just all things parent leadership, family-based, all of the things. And I will hand it over to Shanae Russell to do her introduction first, and then tomorrow.
Thank you, Monica. Hello, everyone. My name is Shanae Russell. I'm with the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, where I am our parent cabinet coordinator. And I've been with the agency for about 5.5 years now, which is crazy. And I also am a mom. I also am a social worker, specifically community organizing is where my heart is. And that has led me to this work of really wanting to help embed family voice in systems. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tamara.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tamara Grice. I have been in the early childhood system since about 2000 and I'll say 14 or 13. Currently, I work at the University of Michigan on as a facilitator and a project assistant, working with families around food insecurity.
Thank you. I want to say that this webinar will be recorded and available for anyone who wasn't able to attend live. And we are just really excited. We can go ahead and get started with our first questions, which will be for Tamara. When families struggle to access services, systems often call it a gap. From your perspective, what are those gaps actually made of? Are they funding rules, policies, culture, or history?
Okay. Well, I do always look at things from a bilateral lens, system wise, as well as being a parent and a parent leader. So, um, there's also some things around policy that kind of create gaps where families just don't know what is going on. Um, their decisions may be finalized because the deadlines are not met or paperwork is not in place. As far as from a parent perspective, um, sometimes we're just not asked, what will work for us. So some things may work on paper, but not practically in real life. And so if you're a parent and you're really looking for a true partnership with parents, these systems really need to like engage the parents. Let us get help with the eligibility rules, the service accountability measures that are in place, and just make them actually work for real people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Shanae, parents are often asked to be resilient. What parts of the system require families to work harder than the system does?
Yeah, so I would say kind of building off of what Tamara was saying, I would say, right, the parts related to when it comes to funding, policies, applications, things that weren't really even designed with the end user or the people that are actually the most who need it. They're not thought of with them in mind. So oftentimes, it's built in a way where it is so complicated and makes it that much harder for the families who really need it to be able to access it, especially when we think about right practices just to get an application in. Sometimes there's like multiple steps, or several different applications depending on what the program is or what it is. And they don't speak to each other behind the scenes in the system. So you're often having to do multiple things multiple times. And then, or you get lost paperwork if you don't have or you don't know where it went. So I would say it's definitely the systems where it comes to funding policies or criteria application is often where it's so complicated when it doesn't need to be and puts a lot on families to have to like navigate.
Absolutely. What is, and this could be for either of you, tomorrow's first on my mind for it though. What is one policy or funding requirement that unintentionally creates barriers for families, even though it was designed to help?
Okay. Again, some of these systems just need to actually talk to each other's, but definitely Medicaid and the MDHHS requirements, those assessments, paperwork that needs to be filled in. I can remember personally, I was applying for something and they usually ask if you've received any type of assistance from other states. And of course, I answered yes. And they want to get the paperwork from that. Okay, we're in the 2020s, and the last time I was in a different state was 2007. I did not hold on to that paperwork. So, like there can be like practical exemptions or just like rewording things for people, because sometimes out of frustration, people will think, well, I just can't do it, and not actually speak up for yourself. Like, hey, this is what this actually was. That
Hmm.
might not be your first like thing to just like fight back or say something back. You just feel like, okay, I don't have this, I don't get it. So like really be intentional about like time frames, because that does make a difference. um, Things that you're qualified for, your income, the way that they categorize income is my major like problem, saying that we have to do the gross. Explain why. um, Not qualifying certain bills as something that's needed, like car insurance or things that would affect how much money you actually have liquid. So like
Hmm.
it would be really interesting if, when it comes to how are we qualifying families, that there is actually a work group created for the decision or policymakers and those receiving the support, and really having a actual conversation, bringing in the factors of other systems that you use to qualify someone. So if you're getting child support or not getting child support, if you've identified the child's father, just other erroneous things that can, disqualify people, and like really have a decent and quality conversation about like this is for the children,
Hmm.
and let's think about them first before it's almost like there's a war on poverty. Like so we would
Absolutely.
like to see like families thrive, and no one wants to live on systems. And in order for things to work better, let's work with the people. Like, even if you have to take things case by case, you have case managers, but they can't actually case manage. They're overworked, they're
Hmm.
over, it's just, I have so many ideas, but I digress.
Thank you. No, it's so true. I've always wondered why the question is, what is your gross income? And not considering the fact that we live in Michigan. Here in Michigan, car insurance is required. So why is that not then factored into what our bills are actually amounting to, or the cost of childcare, or all of these things that should be factored into what we actually qualify for when it comes to services?
Could I just
For
add?
Shanae,
Yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to
Well,
add to that. Well, I was thinking as Tamara was speaking, and yes, that is something that is often have come up is when we're looking at criteria and being qualified for services, right? It's always gross income, but not considering, right, all the other things. And it's like, yes, I make this, but I don't actually end up taking this home when you think about every all the major things that we have to have. I also was gonna say, right, for us we have right childcare subsidy here in Connecticut. I'm sure other states have their own version of a childcare subsidy. And oftentimes, right, it's there to help, but oftentimes I think the elements of it could be overlooked, right? When we think about the technical aspect of how they're
mhm,
navigating, right? We're learning this now and trying to improve, having things be better and more simple and easy for families to be able to access. But it took us a long time to even get to this point, and we're still trying to improve. But right, just like how are families applying? Where's the application? How is it? Accessible? What languages is it in? And then where does it go? And then having it be like the actual system that is taking that and then the people that are there to help support. We always have I've heard around like families having a hard time of just speaking to someone, getting understanding where's their application, where are they in the lineup of getting services. And so the other components that need to also assist with the subsidy is something I was thinking of too.
absolutely. Just the other parts that go into it all. How does funding streams or eligibility rules force families to navigate multiple systems instead of receiving coordinated support?
So here in Michigan, we have a lot of silos, and I am really interested in helping with like system building, um, Medicaid, special education, mental health, social services. They have their own rules. They're independently ran instead of thinking about how it coordinates. Because if a child has to like participate in most of these, they should align with rules, with eligibility, speak so that, if there are certain things that a family needs, they can actually access. There's so
Mhm.
much limits to the coordinated support. Um, and we have a thing called wraparound. Like, I think that all systems should wrap around families. And then from my perspective as a parent, um, it's hard to navigate through these systems. They can't work together when the same child is involved. You have to repeat your story to the healthcare system, to the school. Um, I'll even say, for instance, my children both have asthma, and every year they have to like turn in the same paperwork. To be honest, if there was a alignment between the school system and the medical system where they could just press a button and get that information themselves, something that's going to be required each year, that would make it really easier. Because coordinating when I can get my kid in, they're all booked up. Now my child is missing school. When these are things, especially if they don't have to go for a checkup, these are things that could be done virtually. We found out since the pandemic that a lot of things can happen virtually that we otherwise did in person. So, like an alignment and system connectivity would save the consumer from being their own case manager.
hmm I had a big to-do recently in a conversation about raises for home visitors. Because and my biggest thing was I have home visitors who need the very services that they are then offering to the families. They are in the same food bank lines. They are struggling to make ends meet at the same time as trying to provide services. That makes no sense to me. Raises have to happen. So that very idea that we need the same supports that we are then offering out to families. Shanae, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I echo everything Tamara is saying. I was just thinking of the um just the barriers it places families of having to navigate, right? Multiple things, but also, right, may not qualifier have a harder time getting into childcare, for example, because there's two different, three different, hoops to say that they have to jump through or trying to coordinate. And meanwhile, like they just need the services. Like oftentimes families don't have time. They don't have time to be sitting here and doing this paperwork, or trying to figure out like the different fundings just to get the child in the space. And also for the provider side, we've seen this, right? When we had three different state funded programs previously with three different funding criteria and all that, and it made it super complex for just our state agency to be able to navigate. But for the providers, a lot of administrative burdens, a lot of extra reporting, and like that took away from trying to get the child into the space. And so that was a huge thing we've seen, and recently have come down to just one funded single funded program for our state funded program that just launched, and we've already seen how it's helped reduce those administrative burdens, but also for families, right? They can help have a more consistent and fair pay schedule as well, or co-pay scale for their children. So it's really important for the families to get into care.
I appreciate that. And in the chat, she mentioned like there's also then families who are just slightly over income who then can't make ends meet because of the different things and the different systems and the barriers to them being able to just access the bare necessities of what they need to be able to move forward. What role does historical inequity, race, income, geography still play in how today's systems operate, even when policies appear neutral? Shanae, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go first. I think for me, it's all of these, I think, still really deeply affect on a much deeper level. I would say um, having those mental models that are still a part of the systems under I'll use like we have an iceberg framework, but like underneath that, at the very root of when these systems were created, you still have a lot of those inequities that are embedded, and a lot of it is from the mindset and the people that are also operating those systems. And it's not so easily changed, even if it may come off right in the policies appear neutral. There's a lot of complexities behind it that still have those deeply rooted systems that are still operating behind with those historical inequities. And yeah.
Absolutely. Samara?
Um, so historically, race, economics, geographical inequities have played a part in what people can access. Rural, specifically Detroit and under-resourced regions throughout our state, um, affects what things are provided. And from a parent standpoint, there's sometimes longer wait times to receive things, less information available, which I said before. By the time you find out, I'll even say like just a program, not necessarily from a state standpoint, but just those programs that actually fill in the gaps for things that are not available. Say, for instance, my children again, they have asthma. We were looking into central air, but that's something that I cannot get in within my budget. There was an organization that was providing free central air. Guess when I found out about it? when the list was closed, because it's only so much funding, and this is something that was a high need based on like the pollution in that area, and so
Hmm.
they provided that specifically for a certain region. So you never find out about things. There's limited resources, and then when something is working, it's no longer funded. Like it gets funded, it works, and that doesn't prompt people to say, "Well, let's find some more funds or let's continue to fund this." No, it goes away. So that happens a lot in low income spaces. I feel like policies should be equal, but I also know that I've lived in the Upper Peninsula where there is a lot of rural, and they kind of experience the same thing as far as continuity of resources. In one region, there's not a hospital. Like, how is this possible? You have to go 50, 60 miles to a hospital. Imagine being pregnant and you're in labor. Am I going to make it to the hospital? So it's like so many things that we have to like consider when we are providing like financial support or funding for families. Like, does it actually make sense? And most of the time, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Absolutely. It just the idea that I was on a call and someone I was like, well, there's only one hospital in that area. And someone said, well, what do you mean? It's Michigan. Like you think about where we're at in today's age that someone having just the bare access to a hospital and it being that far that there is no birthing hospital in that area is still wild to me to this day. And that was 15 years ago when I made that assumption. But there are so many things that go into the systems that we have to pause and think about just just access is sometimes not there, and that's built into the system. When they designed Michigan, they didn't put a hospital there. And at some point, we have to pause and be like, hey, there are plenty of babies being born in that region. Switching over to power, voice, and decision making. At what points in the systems are families expected to comply rather than co-create? And what would it look like to shift that balance? Shanae?
Yeah, so I would say I I think where it's really complex or systems are so like on autopilot kind of where it's just been been doing this for I've seen it like in state and government it's like oh we've been doing this for 30 years it's been like this and this is how it is and it's really hard I think when you have systems that have just operated for so long in a certain way to even get it to a place where it can operate with no, let's really have families or parents be a part of like co-creating. And I think also it's twofold. It's more of that, and also where it's points in the system where it's really complex or where it's a lot of pressure, like time. I've seen this with the work with us in the state. A lot of times there's a very limited time. Things are just go, 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 right? We have to get this done and this done, and there's no like wait, let's pause, let's stop. We really need to wait before we just act and really have bring our parents in and bring our families in early on instead of, we go ahead and all of these decisions have been made and it's to the end point and then it's like, oh, by the way, let's get feedback then, only to find out, wow, if we would have brought them in sooner, instead of being stuck in this is how we do things, then actually the system would have saved us time and it would have been much better instead of having to then spend more dollars on trying to fix something. So I think the pressure points when there's time, a lot of pressure on the system, and then also where there's just a lot of the same, like, right, mental model of like, we've been doing this is how it's going. We can't change our way of doing or how things have been just to input or have like parents be able to co-create.
Absolutely. And I also think about the space of sometimes they don't know, like the true value of what it means to have the end user in the beginning and the time saved. And I can remember when I came on as a parent leader and I was like asked the question of like, what should we work on? And I'm like, I don't know. So then we got to talking about different things. I have a kiddo who is on the spectrum and he tested in the black for communication. So they were like, "Oh, early on needs to come out, showing all of the things." So when I sat on this group and I was like, "Hey, well, wouldn't it have just been easier if early on came out like the same day as you guys? Like, could you guys have worked together?" Similar to the question earlier about navigating a whole bunch of systems at one time. I'm new. My son's testing in the black. I don't know what that means. I'm a first time mommy. I was a very young mommy. Um, and it was the idea that because of that conversation, now that very program, they always, the first two visits with early on, the home visitors there. This is what we saw come up on the ASQ. This is what we've already worked on. These are the things that we're going to bring in, and then being able to work hand in hand going forward. Tomorrow,
That was a great point. Having people in the same room really actually creates a conversation, which I noticed that when sometimes our processes start for parents, They're not necessarily in the actual, um, creating a process. They're more so able to engage with policy that's already been set, sometimes for 40 years. Although things and regions and the way of life has changed, um, the policy has not evolved with the changing of the times. And what I think is being invited to comment and not actually decide is like you walking into something, everything's in place and you're lost, you don't know what to do. But if you were able to like comment, give your opinion, it's like you can take ownership, you feel included, you feel seen and heard, and the policies that are in place makes no one feel seen and heard. I even believe those that work in the system also don't feel seen and heard because some of the things actually affect them adversely as well, as you mentioned, um, when you need the same supports that you're giving others. So,
Hmm.
like, it's a two-way street. It doesn't work for anyone. Um, the true partnership would mean that families will get to shape the rules, the service models, the accountability measures that actually are work for folks. Being a part of the U of M project that I've been working on, as it relates to food insecurity, there was one policy that I was animate about getting it looked at, and because I think having more access to the decision makers and policymakers due to like what the pandemic allowed us to kind of do remotely. We were able to talk to someone, and I said, "What does someone receiving support from their child's father through child support have to do with a child eating?" So I can't find the father, so I'm not eligible for food. The alignment on that is really shaky and fishy when it comes
Hmm.
to the overall support of making sure you have a healthy family. So because I can't produce a father, my child should not be able to eat. And so, me bringing that up, they actually revisited that and kind of like changed some of the wording on that particular policy. And I was so happy because I know there are moms that fall into that category where that did affect their eligibility. And I don't think that there should be an alignment in my mind. And then we have conversations like this, just things that don't work. You realize that maybe this whoever made this policy, maybe at that time it was something that needed to be addressed, but as we move forward, we need to like move forward in the way of thinking and what works now and how our families thriving now or how our families falling through the gaps now, um, and systems throughout that the children are using. We have to think about that. How is this the best experience for the child? This is the best experience
Hmm.
for the family, and how can we also, remain accountable on both parts? Family being accountable for what they say that they can do and will do, but also those that are providing the funding. How can we be accountable to making sure families have a way of life that actually is fair?
Absolutely. I love that. You actually slid into the next question I was going to ask, so I will think of a different one instead. Um, for Shanae, can you share an example of a system change that improved access for families and what had to be redesigned to make it possible?
Yes. So we've actually here in Connecticut, I would say the past 5 years, actually since COVID, we have been slowly, obviously, right? We all know it during COVID, and everything that families were navigating and childcare was at the like tipping point. And here in Connecticut, we had a blue ribbon panel on childcare that the governor had started in 2022, and this was really to help had a panel that they were charged to create a 5-year strategic plan on childcare. But to get to that point, there was a lot of listening sessions, a lot of community input, and also I made sure that our parent leaders were involved and their feedback was embedded into the plan. And the plan has several areas, but we really seen, right, access and affordability, workforce was a huge thing. And from that, one of the changes that we seen as a result from the early on um, feedback and from the plan was the early on what I said, our combining of our different state programs that we had for childcare. We had like 3 different ones, and newly we just had all of these combined into one state-funded program, which is called Early Start Connecticut. And this just was started or just went into effect July 1 of 2025. And that really helped make it simpler, right, to access high quality early care and education programs, easier to understand, easier rules, and then more fair and consistent copay scale for families. And so that was something it took time though to get to that. And also a part of our Early Start Connecticut new program is also increased focus on family and community needs through local governance partners that we now have across our state. And these have parent leaders embedded in those kind of like local community tables that we have a part of our LGPs. But to get there, it took, right, all of the work of just listening to everyone across the state to create our strategic plan. Then from there, going to the legislature and getting it to pass this Early Start Connecticut to have the one program. And then also from that, right, having through the legislature being able to change the rules, eliminate previous existing programs that we had so we could have this new one, and then having these new policies and rules to align eligibility requirements, to help standardize the family copay scale. And then we just recently had passed last legislative session our Early Childhood Education Endowment Fund. And so this is now where we have funds that are in our endowment building, and then through 2027, right? Small part as the fund grows, money's being deposited and being able to go towards our Early Start Connecticut state funded programs so to expand access for families and help also make it affordable. And so eventually we'll get to where we can have free for families under a certain like income limit. So we're slowly getting there, but it took a lot of time just to get through those, right? Getting stuff, rules change, policies change, getting it passed through the legislature, and then all of these other steps to gradually get to a place where it can be, right, beneficial for families, like Tamara was saying.
I love that. And thinking of like all of the things that had to go into being able to do it, and then you guys are on the other side of it, and really being able to get to a place of seeing something when it doesn't work, but it's also great to see when it does work. Tamara?
I also would say that during the pandemic, the flexibility with having the paperwork, which is a major challenge sometimes for families, especially if you're navigating homelessness or being unhoused, rather, um, and being able to like pick up your paperwork or even receiving paperwork. So they were more flexible with those not deadlines and timelines, and it really did work for families. Not having to, get the eligibility, all those requirements, so that access to being able to, renew with less of the barriers were definitely helpful. They allowed the families to get what they needed. I personally feel like if we can get like maybe that may have been too extreme, but we can kind of meet in the middle now, have some of those things like permanently in place, especially if is having, emergency situation like being unhoused or
Hmm.
just some other challenges where they're not able to like access certain things, that we can kind of support them more.
Absolutely. I love that. Would you say that's like one thing that you would redesign going forward, just always, to make it easier for reducing those barriers for families?
Yes, I did. I'll say it might have been in 22. I interviewed uh, several families that have experienced evictions and how their access to food, how their access to like MDHHS as a whole, what were the actual barriers? And one of the major barriers was receiving like your mail. It's at my old address. Now my whole case shut down. I have no way to get to. So like really being able to respond to people's changes and things of that nature. Or, hey, I can only receive mail because the system, the actual virtual system, is locking me out because I have two case numbers. I mean, I know these are like so super specific
Mm-mm.
examples, but like really kind of thinking about how if one thing breaks down, that should not close your case, or like just having that those other like alternatives or plan B, C, D, F for families to be able to access or, request or recertify in a way that makes sense based on their circumstance.
Absolutely. I love that. Yes, Shanae.
I was just gonna say to Tamara's point, I mean, I find that sometimes even the little things make such a huge impact, right, in the system. So like I always say there's never no little thing that can be done that can just have a ripple effect or just make such an impact. So those are all important.
Very important. And this conversation alone shows the importance of having parents at the table. So these little things that a system wouldn't have even thought of, oh, the two case numbers, because the first one got shut down because my address changed. I now have two case numbers. That's what's locking me out. Or you have to go to the red door on a Thursday, knock three times, spin in a circle to be able to access those little details that first off, there shouldn't be a red door on a Thursday. That's a whole nother conversation. But those little pieces that actually go into someone being able to access services, you wouldn't know unless you have parents at the table to have these kind of conversations to be like, what worked for you? What didn't work for you? What is it that was a part of the system that probably needs to change? My biggest thing is when we are trying to staff all of these places is let's utilize the people who are receiving the services. Let's figure out pipelines to get families the skills that they need to then come on and be staff, because that's how the systems will change. If you have end users come forward and being able to change systems from inside. Yes, Tamara.
Monica, you brought up something I've been saying. You're sending people to work first. You're sending people to go and get employment. It's in your best interest to employ the people that have the lived experience over the educational. I get that people want this educational experience, but the lived experience thinks more practically, in my opinion.
Hmm.
There's a practicality to it that makes things streamlined when you actually understand the system that you're working in. That's just like someone who has started at the bottom and has worked their way up,
Hmm.
understands each level. Those people have brilliant eyes
Yeah. Hmm.
that would help things work better. They don't have a myopic view. They have this overview of what things worked from here and how
Hmm.
I need to be here in order for those people down there to actually get what they need and maybe need less of it.
Yeah.
But that taking people that are in, those areas where they need to find employment and actually let them do the internship or whatever in the DHHS offices, would I think that will open up a bigger like win and maybe lessen some of these caseloads.
Absolutely. I mean, they're struggling with hiring. Why not think of a way to hire those that they're, yeah. that just makes the most sense to me. I think wholeheartedly about the role that I was just in and how beneficial it was that not only was I a family who received the services, then I was the one in the background handling the data and then becoming the supervisor. In the conversations around budget, I'm different. I'm a different kind of supervisor because I'm like, I could see it in her face if she was stressed about a bill while she was with me. I could see if she's not present or if she can tell me, oh, yeah, you go to the red door because she had to go to that red door because she wasn't making enough money. And she may not have said it to me, but you can feel when someone has something else going on that I advocated in a different way because I've been there. I've walked these steps, I've seen it, I've explored it, I know what it looks like. So let's figure out better ways to really be able to support them and not just making the bare minimum. Yes, Shanae.
No, I was just gonna say, so speaking to me because similar, Monica, I was the same, right? Coming from, receiving services myself, my mom receiving service generationally, receiving services, right? And always feeling like I didn't have any control, right? Even growing up. And then wanting to be, I went into social work because I really wanted to be a part of, changing systems and not helping others when I knew what it felt like to be frustrated and be a single parent and just not feel like I knew where to go, what to do. But then finding my way of like not only now working at the agency that I actually received services from before, so I have that other mindset there, but then being able to like point that out to others who are, in charge of funding, in charge of all these things, like, wait, like, do you know what it feels like to have a small child, be in a line waiting for things, also have to try to figure out childcare when you can't afford that, and then figure out, are you going to have food on the table? And then also going through homelessness, like, do you know what that feels like? And being able to your point, Tamara, right? That practical, that you sometimes you get lost and sucked into the different systems and in the day to day that you lose sight of like, who is this for? What does this look like in real life?
Yeah, being too far removed from what we are trying to actually provide. It's hard to see it if you're too far from, if you've never had to access services, if you've never had to worry about if your lights were going to be cut off, if you've never had to worry about those things, you may not have that same empathy and sympathy for the families who are struggling to get to that red door or those things that are important. What is one assumption that systems need to unlearn in order to better serve families? And Shanae, you can take that one first.
This is a good question. Like, there's like so many I could see. I think one of the things is, right, just that, right? Oh, it's been operating for 20 years. Like, this is how it's always been. So there's nothing wrong. Like the system's working fine. I think that's one assumption. Just because something maybe is perceived to be operating doesn't mean it's actually go meeting the need or actually helping those who need it.
Absolutely. Tamara?
Recertification schedules, documentation requirements, service limits, um, just not listening. Um, I think that sometimes some of the service providers' hands are tied. They really can't necessarily be human because
Hmm.
they're not actually the decision maker. They're just the go between, the liaison for you to receive a service and not actually able, in a practical sense, to make a decision or override a decision or be human. Now, that's because of technology. You're trying to make things streamlined. Um, the humanity is taken out of it. I remember talking to systems and pouring my heart out, and it's like, okay, the person was like, "Why did you get yourself into this situation? There's really nothing I can do. These are the rules, and that's just that." And she was truly correct, but the harshness of it was like, you're talking to me, but it's not really, you're not really saying anything. because you're going to follow what your protocol is because that's your job. And that's where we have an issue. When you're dealing with people, if it's just a job, I don't know if that actually works for humans. When you are a
Yes.
human doing human to human contact, we have to put the humanity back into it. And sometimes, as a business, that has been removed because there are bottom lines, there are budgets, there are things that needs to function properly, and we can't necessarily do the human thing because that takes time, and we're moving at a fast pace. Even though systems don't even move at a fast pace, you guys know that. We don't have time to be human, and I think with that being said, it kind of makes things frustrating. Some people go without. I remember a while ago there was someone who was homeless and they were in their car living in a parking structure at a casino and their children passed away.
Hmm.
That should not have ever happened
Hmm.
if the humanity was in the systems, because there should have been an alignment. Even with the shelter system, or those that respond to homelessness, they can only take so many, and if there's no place for you to go, you are in the streets for that night, or however the case is. So it's just like, what do you do when we have
Absolutely.
to be efficient? We have to remove humanity. Is that the best choice?
Shanae, you wanted to add to that? Or you got okay. The the idea of removing humanity is not something that we want to think of. We probably need to put more human back in humanity. Really think about what it is to sit in someone else's shoes and really think about what it means to do that. I feel like a lot of our conversation today was around different systems and bringing it back to the center of the work that we do here at the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership is really highlighting the fact that parents and parent voice and expertise is critical to being able to move systems to a place that really allow for systems to work better, for overall as a humanity that we're able to grow and to unlearn things that have broken the systems, that have allowed for things to be inequitable for so long. The only way to do it is to really utilize end users in real decision making, not just them there to check boxes, not them just there to be in the space to say, yes, we use parent voices, but co-creating and not in a, oh, I have an agenda, look at it. No, let them be in the space. Allow for them to co-create the agendas with you because they can save you a whole lot of time. I know I shared previous about sitting on a work group and they were talking about well child visits and they were talking about how families' well child visits had gotten so low in this particular area. So they were doing all of these projects for years. And I joined this work group and simply said, y'all do know that that bus stop moved that was like right in front of the hospital. And if it's wintertime, I'm not pushing a stroller a mile, 2 miles to the hospital. So I can understand if I felt that way, that there's probably a lot of other families who also did not want to push their strollers in the snow. That simple just suggestion, the movement back of that bus stop, well child visits are back up. But they had done incentives, they had been sending gift cards, they had been offering all of these things to get well child visits back up, but never thought to ask parents why they were not making it to their well child visit. That simple, the bus stop was moved could have saved y'all a whole lot of money in incentives. Well, I'm sure the people who got the incentives were really excited about the gift cards and the car seat or the whatever. Um, but it was just as simple as move that bus stop back. And you imagine that had you had a parent in the beginning while you were co-creating that agenda, you probably would have been able to save a lot of time, a lot of energy, and fix the system, and more babies would have made it to their well child visit earlier. As we wrap up, I do not see any Q&A. Is there anything that is left on either of your minds about something that we could do to allow for parents to really be true partners? What is it that is needed to make family leaders really be able to participate as true partners in these systems?
I mean, I will start to say, it comes to me, I think of, right, with systems. A system, right, functions, but it's supported and continues to operate from people, right? The people that are operating and running the system and also have the power to be able to make those shifts. And I think it takes changing the mindset of those people that are in that position of power to be able
Mhm.
to see, right, the benefit of, I need to put aside the bureaucracy, put aside my assumptions, put aside and really talk specifically, right? And make the time, right? Things are always moving fast, but we'll save so much more when you see the impact and the benefits when you bring in those that are most affected in the beginning, and part of the process that you'll have a stronger system that actually is operating and helping families instead of actually creating more barriers and causing harm that you didn't realize.
Absolutely. Samara?
I say that when parents are invited to the table, um, and I know this is some cliche thing I'm going to say because I've said it so much. Let them not just be a warm place. Let you
Mhm.
actually honor their expertise. They are an expert of their own lived experience. And
Mhm.
that means that you could learn just having like an open mind to learn. And then when they get to the table, you're being paid at the table. Please honor people's time. If they're doing something
Mhm.
that's going to improve your system, that you're going to get the recognition as if it was your own
Mhm.
information that created this aha moment. Please pay those that are also at that table for their time, because that would really just open up like a world of possibility, them being able to utilize something that they didn't realize was valuable and actually being respected for it. Like me at this point in my evolution as a parent leader, um, I am working part time and I do want something more. And the things that I talked about here is because it has directly affected me. I would love to work at the state level. I have a lot of lived experience, and I've experienced things from not only talking to families and really building a relationship with families, but also talking to system builders and decision makers, and actually being in those spaces where I have been able to rooms where things are actually happening. So I have a unique perspective, and I would love to bring that to the table. And so just having the opportunity to like showcase my lived experience to be on the same platform as educational experience and it actually be
Mhm.
valued will really make a world of difference for my family. And so I
Absolutely.
just I wanted to add that.
Absolutely. I want to honor everyone's time, and I want to say thank you both to Shanae and Tamara for joining us here at the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership and for participating in this panel, being so open and really just supporting us. If you guys want more of our webinars, join us in our next webinar. We will send out a link that will hopefully be able to tag the two recordings together, share it out as one for those who were not able to join. And we can be reached at the FPL at ecicforkids.org. I normally have a slide that pops up, but technology is not my friend today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for those of you who joined us. And we look forward to the next one. Thank you both and have a great, great, great day. Thank you guys. Bye.